life rewritten. Over the next few minutes, you may begin to see yourself and the world in a completely different way. Let's begin. Before you answer today's question, I want you to do something unusual. Don't answer it too quickly, because if the answer comes to you immediately, there's a good chance you haven't really thought about it. So here's the question: who is really in control, you or your brain? Most people would answer without hesitation: of course it's me. After all, you're the one who chose what to wear today. You're the one who clicked on this video. You're the one who decides whether tomorrow will be different from yesterday. At least, that's what it feels like. But if you're truly in control of your own mind, why is the hardest person to control yourself? Why do we stay up late even when we know we'll regret it tomorrow? Why do we procrastinate when we understand it only creates more stress? Why do we promise ourselves that this time will be different, only to repeat the same habits a few days later? If you're completely in charge, why do your own decisions so often work against your own goals? Maybe we've misunderstood something fundamental. We've always imagined the brain as a tool, a machine that quietly waits for instructions. But what if that's not what it is at all? What if your brain isn't simply following orders, but directing far more of your life than you realize? Think of your brain less as a machine and more as an operating system. Its first priority isn't success. It isn't happiness. It isn't helping you achieve your biggest dreams. Its first priority is survival. That changes everything. Your brain prefers what is familiar. It prefers certainty over uncertainty, predictability over possibility, safety over change. That's why growth often feels uncomfortable, not because you're moving in the wrong direction, but because your brain is leaving territory it already understands. Imagine walking across an open field. The first time you have to force your way through the grass. The second time it's a little easier. After walking the same path 100 times, a trail appears. The next person doesn't have to think. They simply follow the path. Your brain works the same way. Every repeated thought strengthens a mental pathway. Every repeated action makes that pathway easier to travel again. Eventually, what started as a choice becomes a habit. And what began as a habit slowly becomes part of your identity. One day you catch yourself saying, "That's just who I am." But is it? Or are you simply walking the path you've traveled the most? Sometimes we mistake repetition for personality, we mistake familiarity for truth, and we mistake old patterns for who we really are. The question is, if your habits are quietly shaping your identity every single day, how much of your life is still being chosen consciously, and how much of it is simply running on autopilot? For thousands of years, your brain learned from one source, the world around you, your family, your friends, your experiences. Every success taught it what to repeat. Every failure taught it what to avoid. But today, your brain has a new teacher: algorithms. Every video you watch, every article you read, every post you pause to look at, every click, every search, every second of attention is quietly teaching the system who you are. And the system responds by giving you more of the same. Not because it's trying to control you, but because it's trying to keep you engaged. Day after day, your world becomes a little more familiar, a little more comfortable, a little more predictable. Eventually, something strange begins to happen. You stop discovering new ideas. You start collecting evidence for the ideas you already have. Your beliefs feel stronger, not necessarily because they're more accurate, but because you have seen them repeated so many times. The human brain has a dangerous habit. It often mistakes familiarity for truth. The more often you hear an idea, the more natural it begins to feel. And once something feels natural, you stop questioning it. Maybe that's why the greatest threat to independent thinking isn't a lack of information. It's living inside information that never challenges you. So before asking whether the world is influencing your mind, perhaps we should ask something far more uncomfortable. When was the last time you willingly changed your mind? Part 4. Most people believe that thinking is automatic, but real thinking is surprisingly rare. Receiving information isn't thinking. Remembering information isn't thinking. Repeating information isn't thinking either. Thinking begins the moment you're willing to question what you already believe. That sounds simple, but your brain doesn't like uncertainty. Every time your beliefs are challenged, your brain treats it like a potential threat. That's why changing your mind can feel uncomfortable, sometimes even painful, not because the new idea is wrong, but because your identity has become attached to the old one. The older we become, the easier it is to defend our opinions, the harder it becomes to examine them, and that's where growth quietly stops. The smartest people aren't the ones who are always right. They're the ones who remain willing to be wrong. Real intelligence isn't measured by how many answers you have. It's measured by how often you're willing to ask, what if I'm mistaken? Because the moment you believe you've reached the final answer, your curiosity begins to disappear. And without curiosity, the brain slowly stops growing. So maybe the real question isn't whether you're capable of thinking. Maybe it's this: are you still willing to challenge the person you've become? Here's something worth thinking about. Every decision you make begins with a thought, but not every thought deserves to become a decision. Most of us never stop to make that distinction. A thought appears, we accept it. An emotion rises, we react. An impulse arrives, we follow it. And all of this happens so quickly that it feels natural. But natural doesn't always mean true. Your first thought isn't necessarily your best thought. It's simply the fastest one. It's built from yesterday's experiences, old fears, past successes, unfinished emotions, and habits you've repeated for years. The problem is, if you never question that first thought, it quietly becomes the architect of your future. Imagine two people facing the exact same situation. One immediately reacts, the other pauses. Only one of them creates space between thought and action. And inside that tiny space, something extraordinary happens. Choice. Your life is not shaped by every thought that enters your mind. It's shaped by the thoughts you choose to believe. Perhaps that's what real freedom has always been. Not the freedom to think anything, but the freedom to decide which thoughts deserve your trust. Because the moment you stop questioning your own mind, your mind quietly begins making every decision for you. For a long time, people believed intelligence was the ability to answer questions. Today, almost any AI can answer thousands of them in seconds. So maybe intelligence was never about answers in the first place. Maybe it has always been about something else. The ability to ask better questions, the courage to challenge familiar conclusions, the wisdom to remain curious, even after finding an answer. Think about it. Every major discovery in history began with someone refusing to accept what everyone else believed. Not because they knew more, but because they were willing to question more. Progress has never belonged to people who simply collected answers. It has always belonged to people who challenged them. That may become even more important in the years ahead. As artificial intelligence grows more capable, the value of human intelligence may no longer depend on how much information we can memorize. Instead, it may depend on whether we're still willing to think independently, whether we're still willing to doubt, whether we're still willing to ask, what if everyone, including me, is wrong? The future won't belong to the people who have the fastest answers. It will belong to the people who continue asking the questions that machines cannot. So maybe the greatest challenge of the future isn't building smarter technology. Maybe it's making sure humanity never stops thinking for itself. Perhaps we've been asking the wrong question all along. Instead of asking whether your brain controls you, maybe we should ask something even more important. Who is training your brain? Every conversation you have, every book you read, every video you watch, every person you admire, every habit you repeat is quietly shaping the way your mind works. Your brain is constantly learning. The question is, what is it learning from? Many people spend years trying to change their lives. Few spend time changing the patterns that create those lives, because changing your future doesn't always begin with changing your circumstances. Sometimes it begins with changing what you repeatedly feed your mind. A single thought rarely changes a life, but thousands of repeated thoughts eventually become beliefs. Beliefs become actions. actions become habits, and habits quietly become a destiny that feels almost impossible to escape. Your future isn't built by your biggest decisions. It's built by the smallest decisions you repeat every day. That's why real transformation is rarely dramatic. Most of the time, it begins in complete silence. One different question, one different choice, one moment where you refuse to let yesterday decide tomorrow. So let's return to where we began. Who is really in control? You or your brain? Maybe the answer isn't fixed. Maybe the answer changes every single day. Every time you act without thinking, your habits take control. Every time you react without questioning, your past takes control. Every time you refuse to examine your own beliefs, someone else may be shaping your future more than you realize. But every time you pause, every time you question your assumptions, every time you choose awareness over impulse, you quietly take that control back. Perhaps that's what being human has always meant. Not having a perfect mind, but having the ability to reflect on it, to challenge it, to reshape it. Technology will continue to evolve. Artificial intelligence will become faster, smarter, more capable, but none of those advances will ever answer the most important question for you. Who do you choose to become? Because no machine can make that choice. No algorithm can live your life. And no shortcut can replace the quiet work of learning to understand yourself. So the next time you catch yourself saying, "That's just the way I am," stop for a moment. Ask yourself one more question. Is that really who I am? Or is it simply the version of me I've repeated for the longest? That single question may never give you a final answer, but it might give you something even more valuable, a chance to choose again, because in the end, your future isn't shaped by one extraordinary moment, it's shaped by the ordinary choices you make over and over again. And that's why what changes your life isn't a single opportunity, it's a single choice, made consciously every day.